The studio lights burned bright, casting sharp shadows across the set of the Kelly Clarkson show. The audience buzzed with anticipation, their chatter a low hum as the crew adjusted cameras and checked sound levels. Kelly Clarkson, perched on her host's chair, shuffled her cue cards, her smile warm but practiced. She'd done this 1,000 times, her charm disarming even the most guarded guests. Today's guest, though, was Mark Wahlberg, a man whose reputation preceded him. Intense, unpredictable, and fiercely private despite his decades in the spotlight. The stage was set for a routine interview, or so everyone thought. Backstage, Mark paced in the green room, his sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. His team hovered nearby, a publicist scribbling notes, a manager whispering last-minute reminders about promoting his new film, a gritty crime drama that had already stirred buzz for its raw violence. Mark wasn't in the mood for small talk. He'd flown in from a grueling press junket, his patience worn thin by repetitive questions and jet lag. His jaw clenched as he glanced at the monitor, showing Kelly's opening monologue. She was funny, relatable, the kind of host who could make anyone feel at home. But Mark wasn't here to feel at home. He was here to sell a movie, and he wanted it done quick. The stage manager signaled, and Mark strode out, greeted by a wave of applause. He flashed a tight smile, his eyes scanning the crowd before settling on Kelly. She stood to hug him, her energy effervescent, but his embrace was stiff, perfunctory. They sat, and the interview kicked off with the usual pleasantries. His fitness routine, his family, the Boston roots that still colored his accent. Kelly leaned in, her questions light but probing, trying to peel back the layers of a man known for keeping his guard up. The audience laughed at her quips, and Mark played along, but his answers were clipped, his posture rigid. There was a tension in the air, subtle but growing, like a storm cloud forming on a clear day. Kelly shifted gears, diving into the new film. She'd seen an early cut, she said, and praised its intensity, its unflinching look at crime and redemption. Mark nodded, loosening up slightly, his passion for the project evident. He talked about the role, a corrupt cop, wrestling with his demons, and how he'd drawn from real-life stories to shape the character. The audience was hooked, hanging on his words. But then Kelly asked about the film's violence, its graphic scenes that had sparked debate online. Some critics are saying it glorifies crime, she said, her tone curious but pointed. What do you think about that pushback? Mark's expression hardened. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice low but firm. I don't make movies to glorify anything. I tell stories, real stories. People don't clutch their pearls when they see the news, but they want to police art. That's not how it works. The audience shifted, sensing the edge in his voice. Kelly, unfazed, pressed on. Sure, but don't you think there's a line? Like where's the balance between showing reality and maybe going too far? It was a fair question, but Mark's eyes narrowed. He didn't like being challenged. Not here, not now. The exchange hung heavy, the air thick with unspoken friction. Kelly tried to pivot, tossing in a joke to lighten the mood, but Mark wasn't biting. He sat back, arms crossed, his silence louder than words. The crew exchanged glances backstage, sensing the interview veering off script. Kelly, ever the professional, pushed forward, but the dynamic had shifted. Mark wasn't just answering questions anymore. He was sizing her up, weighing every word. The audience could feel it too, their earlier excitement giving way to a restless curiosity. Something was brewing, and it wasn't going to be pretty. The studio's energy had shifted. A taut wire stretched across the set. Kelly Clarkson, sensing the audience's unease, flashed her trademark grin, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. She asked about Mark Wahlberg's preparation for the role, hoping to draw him out with talk of his process, his discipline. You're known for diving deep into your characters, she said, her voice warm, inviting. What was it like getting into the headspace of this cop? Mark's posture softened slightly, his arms uncrossing, but his eyes stayed sharp, guarded. He started to answer, describing late-night talks with real detectives, the weight of their stories. The audience leaned in, caught by the glimpse of vulnerability, but Kelly, perhaps sensing a chance to dig deeper, didn't let it rest. She tilted her head, her expression curious but pointed. Those stories must hit hard, especially with your own past. I mean, you've been open about your younger years, the trouble you got into. Did that make this role feel personal? The question landed like a spark on dry grass. Mark's face tightened, his jaw flexing. The audience held its breath, the air heavy with anticipation. Kelly had crossed a line, touching on his well-documented youth in Boston, the arrests, the mistakes he'd spent years distancing himself from. It was public knowledge, sure, but it wasn't a topic he invited lightly. I don't live in the past, Mark said, his voice low, controlled, but laced with warning. That's not what this movie's about. It's about the work, the story, not me. He leaned forward, his stare fixed on Kelly, unblinking. The crew backstage froze, their headsets crackling with hushed murmurs. Kelly, still smiling but with a flicker of unease in her eyes, tried to pivot. Totally get that. she said, her tone conciliatory. Let's talk about the story then. What do you want people to take away from this film? But the damage was done. Mark's answers grew shorter. His words clipped, each one a brick in the wall he was building between them. The interview limped along, Kelly tossing out lighter questions about his co-stars, the director, even a playful jab about his early days as a rapper. The audience chuckled, but Mark's smile was thin, perfunctory. He was playing the game now, giving just enough to keep the show moving, but nothing more. The tension wasn't just in his words. It was in his body language, the way his fingers tapped restlessly on the armrest, the way his gaze flicked toward the exit. Kelly, sensing the interview slipping, doubled down on her charm, her laugh a little louder, her gestures a little broader, but the audience could see it. Mark was checked out, and something was simmering beneath the surface. Then came the moment that tipped the scales. Kelly, perhaps hoping to salvage the segment, circled back to the film's controversy. I read some posts online, she said, her tone cautious but curious, where fans were saying the movie's violence might hit too close to home for some viewers, especially with all the real-world stuff going on. How do you respond to that? Mark's eyes darkened, his patience fraying. I don't respond to posts, he said, his voice sharp now, cutting through the studio's hum. I make movies for people who get it, not for people looking to be offended. You want to talk about real-world stuff? Talk to the cops out there, not me. The audience gasped softly, a ripple of shock spreading through the crowd. Kelly's smile faltered, just for a second, before she recovered. Fair point, she said, her voice steady but strained. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. The director signaled for commercial, and the cameras cut away. But the tension lingered, thick and unresolved. Mark sat back, his expression unreadable, while Kelly glanced at her cue cards, her fingers gripping them a little too tightly. The audience murmured, sensing the storm wasn't over. Backstage, the crew scrambled, whispering about damage control. But Mark's eyes were already on the door, his mind somewhere else entirely. As the commercial break kicked in, the studio's energy crackled with unease. The audience, still buzzing from Mark Wahlberg's sharp retort, whispered among themselves, their eyes darting between the stage and the crew scurrying backstage. Kelly Clarkson, ever the professional, leaned toward Mark during the pause, her voice low, trying to smooth things over. Hey, I didn't mean to push any buttons, she said, her tone genuine but cautious. Mark nodded, his face a mask of neutrality, but his fingers kept tapping the armrest, a restless rhythm that betrayed his mood. The stage manager counted down, and the cameras rolled again, the show's theme music fading out. Kelly launched back. In her, smile brighter than before, as if sheer willpower could reset the vibe. Welcome back, everyone, she said, addressing the audience with her usual warmth. We're here with Mark Wahlberg, talking about his intense new film. She turned to him, her eyes searching for a way to reconnect. Mark, let's switch gears. You've worked with some incredible directors. What was it like on this set, with all the action and emotion? It was a softball question, a chance for Mark to shine, but his response was curt, almost dismissive. It was work, he said, shrugging. Good crew, good director. We got it done. The audience sensed the disconnect, their earlier enthusiasm dampened. Kelly pressed on, asking about a specific scene, one where Mark's character confronts his past in a raw, emotional moment. She framed it carefully, praising his performance, but her words carried a subtle challenge, an invitation to open up. Mark's eyes flickered with irritation, and he leaned forward, his voice low but cutting. Look, Kelly, I'm not here to dissect my soul for daytime TV. I did the scene. It's in the movie. People can watch it. The audience shifted uncomfortably, a few gasps punctuating the silence. Kelly's smile held, but her eyes betrayed a flash of frustration. She tried to pivot again, this time to audience questions, hoping to diffuse the tension. A fan stood, nervous but excited, asking Mark about his approach to balancing tough roles with his real-life role as a father. It was a chance to humanize him, to bridge the gap. Mark's answer started strong, his tone softening as he mentioned his kids, the lessons he tries to pass on, but then he paused, his gaze hardening as he glanced at Kelly. Thing is, people always want to dig into your life, make it a spectacle. I'm not here for that. The jab wasn't subtle, and the audience felt it, their murmurs growing louder. Kelly, sensing the interview spiraling, leaned in with a laugh, trying to reclaim the moment. Oh, come on, Mark, we just want to know the real you, she said, her voice playful but tinged with defiance. That was the spark. Mark's face darkened, and he stood abruptly, yanking the mic from his collar. You want real? I'm done with this, he said, his voice loud enough to carry without amplification. The audience gasped, a collective jolt of shock. Kelly froze, her mouth slightly open, as Mark tossed the mic onto the chair and strode toward the wings. The crew scrambled, cameras panning to follow him, but he was already halfway off the set. The director yelled for another commercial break, and the screens cut to black, but the chaos lingered. Kelly sat stunned, her hands gripping the armrests. While the audience erupted into a mix of whispers and nervous laughter, backstage, Mark's team rushed to intercept him, their voices low and urgent, but he waved them off, his strides long and purposeful. The stage manager hovered near Kelly, unsure whether to offer comfort or instructions. She took a deep breath, her face recomposing into a mask of professionalism, but her eyes told a different story. The clash had exploded, and the fallout was just beginning. Backstage, the air was thick with panic. Mark Wahlberg stormed through the narrow corridor, his sneakers pounding the floor, his team trailing like a flock of anxious birds. His publicist, a wiry man with a perpetually stressed expression, tried to keep pace, muttering about damage control and press statements. "Mark, hold up, we can spin this," he said, but Mark didn't break stride, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the exit door at the end of the hall. The stage manager's voice crackled through a walkie-talkie, urging someone to get the producer, while muffled chaos from the studio seeped through the walls. The show was unraveling, and Mark's abrupt exit was the match that lit the fuse. On the set, Kelly Clarkson sat under the glaring lights, her composure a fragile veneer. The audience, still reeling from Mark's departure, buzzed with speculation, their phones already lighting up as they typed frantic posts online. Kelly forced a smile, addressing the crowd as the cameras rolled back on. "Well, folks, that was unexpected," she said, her voice steady but laced with a wry edge. "Let's keep the energy up, though, we've got more show to do." She launched into a segment about the next guest, a comedian waiting nervously in the wings, but her usual spark was dimmed, her glances toward the side of the stage betraying her distraction. The crew worked double time, adjusting lights and cues, trying to salvage the episode. Backstage, Mark reached the green room, slamming the door behind him. His manager, a calm woman with years of experience handling his temperament, stepped in front of him. "You can't just walk out like that," she said, her tone firm but not confrontational. "This is Kelly's show. Mark, people will talk." Mark paced, his hands on his hips, his breath heavy. "She pushed me," he said, his voice low, raw, "kept digging, like I'm some circus act. I'm not doing that." His manager nodded, knowing better than to argue now. She pulled out her phone, already drafting a message to the studio's PR team, hoping to smooth things over before the story exploded. Meanwhile, Kelly powered through the segment, her banter with the comedian, forced but convincing enough for the cameras. The audience laughed on cue, but their energy was scattered, their attention split between the stage and the drama they'd just witnessed. Social media was already ablaze, clips of Mark's exit spreading like wildfire, fans and critics alike, dissecting every word, every glance. Some called him unprofessional, others praised his authenticity, but all agreed, this was no ordinary interview gone wrong. The clash had tapped into something raw, a collision of two personalities who'd misread each other from the start. In the green room, Mark's publicist finally got through to the show's producer, who was frazzled but diplomatic. "We need to talk," the producer said over the phone, his voice tight. "Can Mark come back out? We can reset, do a quick wrap-up." Mark overheard, shaking his head before the question was even relayed. "I'm done," he said, grabbing his jacket. From the couch, his manager stepped in again, her voice softer now. "You walk out that door, this is the story. Not the movie, not your work." This Mark paused, his hand on the doorknob, his eyes flickering with doubt for the first time. The weight of her words hung heavy, but his pride was a wall, unyielding. Back on set, Kelly wrapped the segment, her smile unwavering as she teased the next part of the show. But as the cameras cut to another break, she leaned back in her chair, exhaling sharply. A production assistant handed her a water bottle, whispering something about Mark's team wanting a word. Kelly nodded, her expression unreadable, but her mind was racing. She'd handled tough guests before, but this felt different, personal. The clash wasn't just about a question gone wrong, it was about two worlds colliding, and the fallout was far from over. The green room door stayed shut, but the tension seeped through its cracks. Filling the backstage corridors of the Kelly Clarkson show, Mark Wahlberg stood by the window, his jacket slung over his shoulder, staring out at the studio lot where crew members darted between the stages. His manager, still on her phone, negotiated with the show's producer, her voice a low murmur as she tried to broker a truce. "He's not coming back out," she said finally, glancing at Mark, who gave a curt nod. The publicist, pacing nearby, was already fielding calls from entertainment blogs, their questions sharp and relentless. The story was spiraling, and Mark's silence only fueled the fire. On the set, Kelly Clarkson powered through the next segment, introducing a musical performance with her usual warmth. The audience clapped along, but their energy was fractured, their whispers about Mark's exit louder than the music. Kelly's smile held firm, but her eyes flicked to the side, where a producer signaled something from the wings. She nodded subtly, keeping her focus on the performance, but her mind was elsewhere. The clash had left a mark, not just on the show, but on her. She prided herself on connecting with guests, on making them feel seen, but Mark had shut her out, and the sting was real. Backstage, The producer met with Mark's team in a cramped office, the air heavy with urgency. "We can cut the segment differently," the producer offered, his tone diplomatic but strained. "Focus on the movie talk, downplay the rest. But we need a statement, something to cool this down." Mark's manager hesitated, knowing his stance. "He's not apologizing," she said. He felt cornered out there. The producer sighed, rubbing his temples. "Kelly's not the enemy here. She was doing her job." The words hung, unanswered, as Mark's publicist typed furiously, drafting a neutral statement about scheduling conflicts to explain his abrupt departure. Online, the narrative was taking shape without them. Clips of the interview, grainy and out of context, racked up views on social media, with hashtags pitting Mark's intensity against Kelly's probing style. Some fans defended him, calling Kelly's questions intrusive. Others criticized his ego, praising her for holding her ground. The studio's social media team monitored the storm, flagging posts that veered into speculation about personal grudges or staged drama. But the truth was messier, a clash of personalities amplified by the spotlight, and no one was ready to back down. In the green room, Mark finally spoke, his voice low but resolute. "I didn't sign up for an interrogation," he said, more to himself than his team. His manager nodded, choosing her words carefully. "It's not about her, it's about the story people are writing now. You want to control it, you need to say something." Mark's eyes narrowed, his pride warring. With pragmatism, he'd built a career on authenticity, on never bending to the media's whims. But this was different. The narrative was slipping from his grasp, and walking away wouldn't stop it. On set, the show wrapped, and Kelly thanked the audience, her voice bright but tinged with exhaustion. As the cameras cut, she headed to her dressing room, the weight of the day settling in. A producer caught up with her, relaying the latest from Mark's team. No return, no apology, just a vague statement in the works. Kelly shook her head, a wry smile breaking through. "Well, that was a first," she said, her tone masking the bruise to her confidence. She'd faced tough moments before, but this one felt raw, unresolved. As she closed her dressing room door, the noise of the studio faded, but the echoes of the clash lingered, setting the stage for what would come next. The studio lot had quieted, the audience long gone, but the echo of the clash between Mark Wahlberg and Kelly Clarkson pulsed through the digital world. In her dressing room, Kelly sat at her vanity, scrolling through her phone, the glow illuminating her face. Posts about the interview flooded her feed, some praising her poise, others accusing her of pushing too hard. She set the phone down, rubbing her eyes, the weight of the day settling like dust. Her team lingered nearby, offering assurances, but Kelly waved them off with a tired smile. "It's fine," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Just one of those days." But as she glanced at the mirror, her reflection betrayed a flicker of doubt, a question of whether she'd misread the moment. Across town, Mark sat in the back seat of a black SUV, the city lights streaking past as his manager briefed him on the fallout. The statement they'd released, citing scheduling conflicts, had done little to quell the storm. Entertainment sites ran headlines dissecting his walkout, some painting him as a diva, others as a man standing his ground. His manager scrolled through her tablet, reading snippets aloud. "They're saying you overreacted," she said, her tone neutral but pointed. Mark stared out the window, his silence heavy. "They don't get it," he muttered. "Nobody does." His manager didn't push, knowing he needed space. But the clock was ticking, the narrative was hardening, and his next move would define it. By morning, the story had legs of its own. Talk shows and podcasts picked it up, hosts debating whether Kelly's questions were fair or if Mark's exit was justified. Clips of the interview looped endlessly, each view adding fuel to the fire. Mark's team huddled in a hotel conference room, strategizing. His publicist suggested a follow-up interview, somewhere friendly, to shift the focus back to the movie. Mark shook his head, his voice firm. "I'm not groveling," he said. "I said what I said." But his manager, ever pragmatic, pushed back. "This isn't about groveling, it's about reminding people why they respect you." For the first time, Mark seemed to listen, his eyes drifting to the table, weighing his options. Kelly, meanwhile, faced her own reckoning. Her team urged her to address the incident on the next show, to reclaim the narrative with her signature honesty. She hesitated, wary of adding fuel to the fire, but agreed to a brief mention. When the cameras rolled, she stood center stage, her smile warm but subdued. "Yesterday got a little heated," she said, her voice steady. "Sometimes conversations don't go as planned, but that's life. We keep moving." The audience applauded, their support palpable, but Kelly knew the internet wouldn't let it go. So backstage, she confided in a producer, her frustration spilling out. "I wasn't trying to ambush him. I just wanted a real conversation." The producer nodded, but the truth was clear. Real or not, the clash was now a spectacle. As days passed, the story evolved. Mark posted a cryptic message online, a photo from his film set with a caption about staying true to yourself. Fans rallied, but critics called it tone deaf. Kelly, ever the pro, kept her show light, steering clear of the drama. But her next interview with a high-profile guest felt cautious, her questions softer. The clash had left scars, subtle but real, on both sides. Neither reached out to the other, their teams content to let the story fade. Yet in the public's eye, the moment lingered, a raw snapshot of two people caught in the pressure cooker of fame. Their collision, a reminder of the fine line between authenticity and performance. In the end, the movie did well. Mark's performance, earning praise, but the walkout became a footnote, a story fans revisited in comment sections. Kelly's show thrived, her resilience, a quiet rebuttal to the chaos. The clash, for all its heat, was just a moment, but it left a mark, a story neither could fully escape, no matter how far they moved on.